Oh my days, people have their opinions about this camera. People love it. People hate it. It's not pro, it crops 4K. I wonder how many of the people that have argued about this camera online have actually used it. Let me start by saying I'm not a massive Canon fanboy. I like their products, but for me, the way a Lumix camera works and operates has always just been my favorite. It just feels good in my hands and feels natural on shoots, and I really struggle with the cost of Canon equipment because it's really expensive. It's good, it's just a lot. Anyway, I've been using the Canon Eos R, the one filming this video, for work now for around 6 months. And honestly, it's kind of love-hate with this thing, okay? So everything it does do really well. Like, it's an awesome stills camera. It takes amazing video. The autofocus is awesome, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes I just want it to do more. Like, it doesn't really have that one special feature that would make you say, I could never give up my Canon EOS R because this. It just doesn't have that. So what's bad about this camera? Well, I know a lot of people complain about the lack of in-body stabilization, and it would be cool to have that, but honestly, I've shot a lot of footage using just the electronic stabilization, and it comes out great. I guess Canon put some work into that because it was really surprising how good the electronic stabilization is after using the other versions of this in other cameras. And if you combine that with a stabilized lens, it's awesome. People also don't like the fact that when you film in slow motion, it drops you down to 720p, and yeah, I guess that does kind of suck. And I would love to have full 1080 in slow-mo shots. But I would say this, for 720, it's really good. I've used it in professional shoots, and guess what? No complaints. I guess people are more forgiving with slow motion because it looks cool, or maybe the footage just isn't that bad. I actually made a video comparing it with the 1080 slow-mo out of my old Lumix G9, and personally I think it's actually better on the EOS R in 720. Another thing people seem to really hate is the crop on the 4K, and personally I don't actually care about that at all because in the last 3.5 years no client has ever asked me for 4K video. I think it's more likely that you care about 4K more than anyone else watching your video will. I hate filming in 4K. It takes up more space in my card, it slows down my editing, and because 90% of my work is digital first, it tends to end up on Facebook or YouTube, and that means people are watching it on their phones. And guess what? Almost all phones don't have 4K screens. So again, 4K is just not an issue for me. Plus, the 1080 video on this camera is awesome, like so good, like the best I've ever used. And so a lot of the big issues around this camera don't really apply to me specifically. And I think those are the main issues that people tend to moan about with this camera. Now let's talk about what I love about this camera. So, what's good about the Canon EOS R and why should anyone buy it in 2020? Well, as far as people saying it's not pro, I just don't buy that. It takes outstanding video footage and has the same sensor as a 5D4. Every job I've had since August 2019, I've used this camera and this camera only, and I don't get complaints. It reminds me of the 5D Mark III, an amazing workhorse, not particularly special, really good and worth the money, but leaves you excited about what might come out next year. The Canon EOS R has awesome autofocus. It's really good. I came over from Micro Four Thirds, which is famously not so good with continuous autofocus, but still, it's really good, and the recent firmware upgrade made it even better. Let me tell you, you don't realize how important autofocus is until you need it or don't have it. I dropped so many other features before I dropped good autofocus, and it's a big part of why I bought a Canon camera in the first place. I also love those super special Canon colors, and how gradable the video footage is that comes out of the body. If there was one thing I could change, maybe I'd add a second SD card slot. Okay, I definitely had a second SD card slot. That's just a no-brainer. I really wish there was one, but there's not. So yeah, there are only two things I really want from the Canon EOS R, and that's dual card slots and for the lenses to be a bit cheaper. I just can't see any reason why this camera wouldn't be worth it in 2020. It's awesome. So yeah, there's my thoughts on the Canon EOS R. It's absolutely worth it in 2020 for me, and not because it's the best camera out there, and not because it's a Canon camera, but because you can rely on it to help you create good content consistently. And on top of that, the main issues that people dislike about it don't really affect me 99% of the time. And guess what? If you have another camera, chances are that camera is great too, and you probably don't need to switch. I could have done all the jobs I've done with my EOS R with my old cameras. But I'm kind of glad I have the new workhorse. It's not special or even a flashy camera, but it works hard and gets the job done. And this one isn't going anywhere anytime soon.